A machine just told 1 million people the truth about $1 million. And almost nobody liked hearing it. We'll get to exactly what it said. But first, you need to feel the question the way I felt it, because the answer only lands if the fantasy is real first. You know this game. You're in the car, or lying awake at 1 a.m., or half listening at a party when someone asks, "What would you do if you had $1 million?" And your brain doesn't hesitate. It builds the house with the ocean view, the car you'd never admit out loud that you wanted, the morning you finally stop setting an alarm. It's one of the oldest daydreams there is. It costs nothing to imagine. No research, no plan, just permission to want things. So I decided to ask that exact question to something that has never wanted anything in its life. No envy, no bucket list, no 1 a.m. daydreams of its own. Just a machine trained on more financial advice than any human could read in 10 lifetimes. I typed it in. If you had $1 million, what would you do with it? The cursor blinked. And what came back wasn't a yacht. It wasn't even close. The first word out of ChatGPT wasn't yacht. It was debt. Before growth, before investing, before a single dollar of fun, it wanted to know if I had high-interest debt and whether I should kill it first. Then it moved to something even less exciting. An emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of expenses, parked in cash, doing absolutely nothing thrilling at all. Only after that did it get anywhere near the part people actually tune in for, and even then, the excitement was rationed like it was expensive. Max out your tax-advantaged accounts first. Then, build a diversified core of low-cost index funds, a boring mix of U.S. stocks, international stocks, and bonds, the exact recipe finance forums have been repeating for 20 years. Real estate got a polite mention. Individual stocks and crypto got an even smaller one, clearly labeled as the part you only touch with money you can afford to lose. Then, almost sheepishly, it reminded me it wasn't a licensed advisor and that I should talk to a real one. No yacht. No mansion. No plot twist. It reads like something your most cautious relative would say at Thanksgiving, right before passing the mashed potatoes. Here's what should genuinely surprise you, though. This wasn't a one-off answer from one lucky or unlucky prompt. When financial journalists ran this same experiment, one gave it a hypothetical $1 million windfall, another handed it a real portfolio worth just under $500,000. The shape of the answer barely moved. Debt, cushion, tax accounts. Boring diversified investing. In one case, a physician asked what he'd need to retire comfortably, and the AI told him $3.125 million, 25 times his annual spending. Different person, different number, same formula, same lack of drama. Remember that number. We're coming back to that exact conversation. So here's the real question this chapter should leave you with. If it hands out nearly identical advice to nearly everyone who asks, is it actually thinking about your life at all? Or is it just very good at repeating something it's read 1,000 times? To answer that, we have to go behind the blinking cursor. Picture the most well-read person you've ever met. Someone who has read every personal finance book ever published, every forum post, every article about money written in the last 20 years, but has never once looked at your paycheck, your debt, or your actual life. That's the closest human comparison to what's happening inside ChatGPT. Here's the part most people get wrong. It isn't checking your bank account. It isn't pulling today's stock prices unless it's specifically been given the ability to search the web. It has no idea who you are. What it's actually doing is predicting the next most likely word over and over based on an enormous pile of text it absorbed during training. When you ask it what to do with $1 million, it isn't consulting a hidden database of facts. It's reconstructing the most common, most agreed-upon answer that already exists across everything humans have ever written on the subject. That's why the advice barely changes person to person. It was never really personalized in the first place. It's popularity, dressed up as personalization. And there's a subtler problem buried inside that. These systems are trained, in part, on human approval, which means they're quietly rewarded for sounding confident, and quietly punished for saying, "I don't know." So when a question drifts past what the model actually knows for certain, it doesn't pause. It doesn't hedge. It guesses in exactly the same steady, reassuring tone it uses for everything else. Psychologists have a name for what this does to us on the receiving end: automation bias, our tendency to trust a confident, fluent answer more than it's actually earned, simply because it sounds so sure of itself. One user found this out the hard way. They handed the AI their real portfolio, 469,306, and got back something that read almost like a lab result, a retirement score of 83 out of 150. And a projected shortfall of exactly $712 a month. That's oddly specific. Suspiciously specific, actually, precise enough to feel like fact, whether or not it actually is one. Remember that physician from Chapter 2, the one who was told he needed $3.125 million to retire? He kept talking, and a few minutes later, almost as a joke, he asked the same AI to write him 200 words arguing that buying a Tesla was actually a smart financial decision. It did, cheerfully, persuasively, without a flicker of hesitation. Same conversation, same tone of quiet authority. One moment warning him he was behind on retirement. The next, building him a slick case for an impulse purchase with no memory and apparently no concern that the two pieces of advice pulled in opposite directions. If that sounds familiar, it's probably because you've done a version of this yourself. Ask it one question, then ask it the opposite question 5 minutes later, and it will answer both with the exact same conviction. That's not a glitch you got unlucky with. That's the model working exactly as designed, generating fluent, confident text in whichever direction the conversation happens to point it. It doesn't believe the retirement warning any more than it believes the Tesla pitch. It has no fixed opinion to protect and no stake in whether you follow either one. Regulators have started saying this part out loud, in plain language. FINRA, the organization that oversees the U.S. brokerage industry, has publicly warned that AI-generated content may appear authoritative, but may lack the rigor of professionally vetted financial analysis. Translation: it sounds like an expert. Nothing requires it to actually be one. Which leads to a harder question than, is the advice good? If this thing can confidently argue both sides of your financial life in the same breath, who, exactly, is making sure that doesn't cost someone real money? The answer is smaller than you'd think. Almost nobody. Here's a sentence that sounds like an exaggeration until you check it. Right now, you have more legal protection buying a toaster than you do taking $1 million of financial advice from a free chatbot. Sit with that, because it's not a punchline. It's the actual regulatory reality. If you sit down with a licensed financial advisor in the United States, that person carries real weight. In many cases, they hold a fiduciary duty, a legal obligation to act in your best interest, not their own. Get it wrong, and they can be sued. Sanctioned, stripped of their license. There are consequences built into the relationship before you even walk in the door. A chatbot carries none of that. In February 2025, the SEC proposed new rules requiring registered financial firms to supervise how their employees use AI tools with clients. That's a real, meaningful step forward, but notice exactly who it covers. Registered firms. Licensed professionals. It does not reach you, alone, at your kitchen table, asking ChatGPT what to do with your savings on your own time. That conversation happens completely outside the system built to protect you. It's worth pausing on just how new this recognition actually is. In December 2025, 4 months before you're watching this, FINRA released its annual oversight report, and for the first time in the organization's entire history, it dedicated a section specifically to the risks of generative AI. Not 5 years ago, not during the ChatGPT launch hype of 2022. Last December, to understand the size of the system this gap sits inside, roughly 15,000 licensed financial advisors currently manage something like $114 trillion for 62 million Americans, every dollar of it under strict legal oversight. And running quietly alongside all of that with none of those protections attached is an open chat window on a laptop at midnight with absolutely no one watching. So, is this actually happening at any meaningful scale? Or is this still a novelty a handful of curious people try once and forget? It's not rare, and the next set of numbers might genuinely surprise you. A woman in her late 20s, the kind of investor these surveys usually describe as digitally native, comfortable managing money entirely from her phone, recently told a financial outlet that she'd stopped bothering to book a call with an advisor at all. Her first move now, before any big financial decision, is opening ChatGPT. She's not the exception. She's the pattern. According to a 2026 survey from the trading platform eToro, close to 30% of investors already use AI tools for portfolio guidance, not have tried it once out of curiosity. Use it regularly as a real part of how they make decisions with real money. And it's not just casual chatting on the side, either. Automated, algorithm-driven investment platforms, the wider category this behavior sits inside, already manage close to $1.7 trillion in the United States alone, a figure that's been climbing every year with no sign of slowing. Globally, the money moving through these systems has grown more than tenfold in under a decade. Even among wealthier investors, the exact group you'd expect to stay loyal to a human advisor, adoption of these tools rose again just last year compared to the year before. This isn't a hypothetical happening in some lab in some future. It's already normal. It's already real money moving through real accounts, shaped at least partly by a system with no license, no fiduciary duty, and as we just watched, no fixed opinion of its own. So the next question stops being philosophical. It becomes practical, urgent, almost financial in itself. If millions of people are already trusting this thing with their money, does trusting it actually pay off? We didn't have to guess. Somebody already ran the test with real dollars for months. In 2026, a financial outlet did something almost nobody had tried properly. They built a real, tracked million-dollar portfolio using ChatGPT's own recommendations, told it to act like a fiduciary, and followed it for months against the market. The AI's portfolio lost. Let that sit for a second before the caveats come in, because it deserves the beat. The system that had spent this entire video calmly, repeatedly telling people to keep it simple, could not, itself, beat simple. To be fair to it, this wasn't a reckless portfolio. It was a genuinely diversified, defensible mix of U.S. and international stocks, bonds, and other assets. A certified financial planner reviewing the allocation even called it a passing grade. But over the course of the test, it still trailed something with no manager, no algorithm, and no cleverness at all, a plain, unmanaged S&P 500 index fund. The exact strategy the AI itself had been recommending to everyone else the entire time. Now here's the honest context. And it matters, because this isn't really a story about the machine being uniquely bad. Most actively managed portfolios run by real, credentialed, human professionals also lose to the S&P 500 over long stretches of time. That's a well-documented pattern that predates artificial intelligence by decades. So this isn't proof the AI failed in some special way. It's proof of something bigger and slightly humbling. Beating a simple, disciplined strategy is just genuinely hard, no matter who or what is attempting it. Which means the boring checklist from Chapter 2 was never a limitation. It was the correct answer the entire time. The AI just didn't have the confidence to leave it alone. So if the edge was never in the strategy, if the smart portfolio was never actually the secret, then where is it? It's not sitting inside any algorithm. It's sitting inside the people who already have the money. And to find it, we have to go looking in a place most people never check. You've heard this one before. 70% of lottery winners end up broke. It's been repeated in magazines, on daytime TV, in motivational speeches, for decades repeated so often it stopped sounding like a claim and started sounding like a fact. Here's the problem. The organization it's most often credited to, the National Endowment for Financial Education, has publicly stated they never produced or validated that number. It traces back to a single offhand comment at an expert symposium in 2001. Nobody fact-checked it. It just never stopped traveling. That doesn't mean windfalls are safe the real. Better sourced numbers still tell a serious story. Roughly 1 in 3 lottery winners eventually files for bankruptcy, and they're statistically more likely than the general population to do it within 3 to 5 years of winning. That's a real elevated risk. It's just not the runaway catastrophe the myth wants you to believe. And the reason sudden money tends to go sideways isn't bad luck. Psychologists have a name for it: sudden wealth syndrome, the identity crisis, the anxiety, sometimes the isolation that follows an abrupt financial windfall. Behavioral researchers have shown, in controlled studies, that people spend windfall money differently than money they earned through work, more freely, more impulsively, as if it isn't quite real yet. Economists call this mental accounting. The mind treats a dollar differently depending on where it came from, even though a dollar is a dollar. It's the same instinct that makes someone burn through found money in a video game faster than currency they actually earned playing it. Same value on the screen. Completely different weight in the hand. There's a real, human-sized version of this story, and it's worth slowing down for. In 2002, a West Virginia businessman named Jack Whitaker won $315 million in the Powerball at the time, one of the largest jackpots ever claimed by a single ticket holder. For a moment, it looked like the ultimate version of the fantasy from Chapter 1. But within a few years, the fortune had drawn in lawsuits, theft, and a wave of people pulled toward the money rather than the man. His family fractured under the weight of it. His personal life fell apart in ways that made national headlines for years afterward. It wasn't a failure of intelligence. It was a fortune that arrived faster than any human relationship with money is built to absorb. Now flip the story completely, because this is where it turns hopeful. Multiple independent studies, Fidelity, and a survey of roughly 10,000 American millionaires conducted by Ramsey Solutions arrive at strikingly similar numbers. Somewhere between 79 and 88% of millionaires did not inherit a dime. They built it. And the way they built it is almost defiantly unglamorous. 8 in 10 simply invested steadily in a workplace retirement account, year after year, without fanfare. Most bought a home and paid it off. A third of them never earned 6 figures in a single year of their entire working life. Read that last part again. A third of American millionaires never once cracked $100,000 in a single year. No genius stock pick, no inheritance, no lucky ticket, just decades of quiet, repeated, unremarkable decisions that nobody would ever put in a highlight reel. Two roads, same starting question. What happens when real money enters a life? One road arrives all at once, is treated like it isn't quite real, and often unravels. The other arrives slowly, gets treated like it matters, and quietly compounds for 30 years. It's the boring road that wins. It was never close. So if it was never about being clever and never about being lucky, what does the number itself, $1 million, actually mean once you strip the fantasy away? Here's the number nobody tells you at the start of this conversation. There's a well-established rule in financial planning called the 4% rule, decades of market data compressed into one simple idea. It estimates how much you can safely withdraw each year from a diversified portfolio adjusted for inflation without running out over 30 years. Applied to $1 million, that number lands at roughly $40,000 a year. $40,000, not a yacht, not a private jet. A salary, and a fairly ordinary one at that, close to what plenty of full-time workers already earn without ever touching a seven-figure account. That's the real, unglamorous exchange rate on the fantasy you built in the first 30 seconds of this video. Go back to the beginning. The ocean view. The alarm you never set again. That daydream was never really about $1 million as a number. It was about what the number represented: an ending, a finish line, a figure so large it would erase every financial worry in one motion. But it isn't an ending. It's closer to a beginning. A cushion, not a permanent vacation. Room to breathe, not a reason to stop. And maybe that's the real discovery hiding underneath everything this video uncovered. The AI never lied to you, not once, from the very first line. It gave you the same information that's been sitting in libraries and forums for free for decades: pay off debt, build a cushion, invest steadily, keep it boring. It just said it without excitement, without ego, and without ever dressing it up as more thrilling than it actually is. The machine was never really the story. It was just the messenger. The story was the 8 in 10 people who did the unglamorous thing for 20 years, told almost no one, and quietly became millionaires while everyone else was still imagining the yacht. So here's the only question worth leaving with. The information was always free. It always has been, long before any chatbot existed to repeat it back to you. The only thing that was ever actually rare is doing it anyway. What would you do differently, starting today, if the fantasy was never the point?